Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Alan Joins, Mayor of Winston, and it's my honor to call to order this meeting of the City Council acting as a committee of the whole, and would ask the city clerk to call the roll, please.
Councilmember Joyner.
Present.
Councilmember Clark.
Here.
Councilmember Andrew Bowen.
Here.
Councilmember Scipio.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Adams.
Here.
Councilmember Taylor.
Present.
Councilmember Hall.
Present.
And Councilmember Burke.
Here.
Councilmember Burke is joining us by Zoom. Welcome, Councilmember Burke. I will now turn the meeting over to the chairman of the Finance Committee, Councilmember Clark.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a few comments before we get going with today's agenda. It is my intention to, at the June 9th Committee of the Whole meeting, to convene a Finance Committee meeting at that time for the Finance Committee to actually endorse the budget. Now, when we do that, there's a number of different things that it's not just one motion, it's a series of motions. But I'm going to wait till then because I'm trying to meet with everyone, not just the Finance Committee members, to get a feel. And I will talk with each one of y'all individually, and I will try to come up with some type of consensus and present that for the Finance Committee to vote on. Now, that will then go to the full committee, which will be the next date that is. Somebody give me
On the 16th.
on the 16th, and the full council will then vote on the same motions again, and that will be for everyone to do it. So what we have had are sessions where the staff has taken comments back, and I'm going to make some comment after Scott finishes whatever he's going to do. But continue to ask questions, and you may certainly reach out to me. I will be reaching out to each one of y'all, but you may certainly reach out as well on any specific items. This is a very thick book, and what may tweak your interest may not tweak someone else's, but please, my door is always open, but as the finance chairman, I try to pull it all together and come up with something that I think will somewhat be happy with. Anyway, with that, Mr. Tisch, you may speak.
So, good afternoon, Chairman, Mayor Pro Tem, members of the City Council. Before we get started, I do want to note at all of your seats, you will see a hand piece of paper. Several years ago, the General Assembly passed a law that essentially says that you can't vote on conflicts of interest with nonprofits on which any elected official may sit on the board, be employed by, or otherwise have an association with. We've tried to reach out via email. We want to make sure that we're hitting all of our bases. So if you would take just a few minutes at some point today or the next day, make sure that we have the correct list of the boards that you sit on or otherwise have an affiliation with. We will have to draw the ordinances based on all of those that are filled out when we come back to you with those recommendations for approval. So we do have a very quick slideshow or presentation over the course of the last two budget workshops. There have been some questions asked. We do have some responses to a few of those. There are quite a few of them. I've spoken with the city manager and have noted they may require a healthier response in the form of an actual report back to the City Council, either in a weekly update or even more formally in committees here in the late summer or early fall, to make sure that we're not just giving you a paragraph on the situation, but that you're fully briefed on the questions that have been asked. So to that end, I'm going to attempt to answer a couple of those questions. I would also note that we did have our two public budget input sessions last night at Little Creek Recreation Center and a week ago at the Carl Russell Rec Center. They were well attended by council members and the public was there as well. I believe many of you saw the types of questions that were asked, but they ranged the gamut from housing to infrastructure. And there were quite a few people who were notably interested in revaluation and property taxes and the like. So we will look to how we would continue those in the future and how we would expand on getting more people to those. But I do think that the people that came were engaged, they did have good questions, and that we were able to provide them at least a semblance of the type of information that they were looking for, even if they didn't like the answer. So to that end, a couple of questions or a couple of responses here. We will get it up on the screen for you. There we go. So the first two slides, there were a couple of questions about Forsyth County and what they recommended in their proposed budget, questions about the tax rate, and then also about community agency funding. So this first slide is specific to their tax rate. So the current year's tax rate for fiscal year 25 at just under 68 cents per $100 of value. Their revenue neutral was just under 50, and they have proposed a rate of about 53 and a quarter, which is 4.2 cents or 8% above revenue neutral. The proposed rate in your budget is 9% above revenue neutral, so we are in about the same area that the county is in terms of being above the revenue neutral calculation. Moving on, there was a question about how aggressively the county may have made cuts to some of their community partners. In looking at their budget document, all of the community partners that were listed as having had appropriations in fiscal year 25 were cut to 0 in fiscal year 26. I would note what you see there on the table are the list of agencies that also receive city funding. So the county cut nearly $900,000 from agencies that we also fund as well at various levels and degrees.
Excuse me, which ones are the ones that we also fund?
So all of them that are on that list, Caladium, Old Salem, Arts Council, every. The proposed cut, the table, or the number in the table is the amount that the county cut from them, which is 100% of the prior year's allocation.
Okay.
Again, I don't know what will ultimately be funded at the county. Some of those may be reinstated, but the proposed budget included reductions for all of those agencies and $1.4 million roughly in other agencies that they were funding. There were a couple of questions about enterprise funds, and so we did stop and specifically public assembly facilities funds from a few council members. So I wanted to offer something that you see in the budget document, but in a little bit different way. So what you have here are the operating ratios, and you can see there that an operating ratio is operating expenses divided by operating revenue. So you're trying to figure out to what extent does the operations of that enterprise subsidize itself. This does not include capital outlays, debt service, or other non-operating revenues, as in transfers or subsidies. And generally speaking, the lower that number on the right is, the better off an operation is doing. So to that extent, we have the fairgrounds. Again, looking at that, what you would be seeing is that there is a slight subsidy needed as operating revenues are not covering operating expenses. Roughly the same thing at the Benton and at Bowman Gray Stadium, a much larger subsidy in terms of the difference between operating revenues and expenditures. There were a couple of questions about the ballpark. The revenues and expenditures related to programming at the ballpark do not run across the city's books, so showing an operating ratio for that would be kind of a useless number. We just have some of the debt service and lease payments that come back to help pay that debt service. Next slide, if we can get there. There was a question about fixed route ridership by route. And so here is the 3-year look at fixed route ridership by route. Again, you can see those nearer the bottom that have lower ridership. The last update that I have for you, I promised when we came last Wednesday that once all of the proposed budget documents were released, that we would update the taxes and fees chart. So the last time you saw it last week, it was our fiscal year 26 against the other cities' 25. We have updated that. I will say that Charlotte, Greensboro, and Raleigh's tax amounts, their rates have stayed the same. Durham's has increased substantially, and then you see some pretty significant water and sewer increases and other fees as compared to what you saw Wednesday. Again, our relative position doesn't change. What happened here is all of the other 4 bars inched upwards in the other direction.
What is this based on?
So it is based on the blue component, dark blue component at the bottom is city property taxes based on the median value in that city.
Medium house, okay.
Yeah, and then the light blue is the average water and sewer bill based on, I can't remember how many CCF it is, but it's the same number of gallons in each city. And then the top is mandatory solid waste fees, motor vehicle privilege taxes, and there may be one other mandatory fee in it, but they're mandatory fees that you can't opt into or opt out of. So generally speaking, those are kind of the high-level responses for questions that we saw or heard from multiple council members. I think many of you may have met with the city manager and had a few questions answered, or were able to catch me in the hallway or in your office and ask some of the more minutia questions. I will say several of those were related to the cash financing strategy that we're using for equipment. Why did supplies and services go up or down? Many of those were for that reason. But if you have any additional questions, staff stands ready to answer those and to support you here as you move towards a recommended budget to the full council.
I have a few comments, but I'm going to go around the table first. Mayor, you got anything?
Just wanted, I don't know if this is the appropriate time, but the chairman and I had a brief conversation about the budget itself. And what I would like to propose, council, is that we ask the staff to come back to us with some options that would allow us to cut thereabouts $4 million, which is roughly 1 cent on the tax rate, to cut an additional cent off that tax rate.
Thank you. I'm just going to start way down there. Any comments you want to make right now?
No.
Okay. Ms. Taylor, Ms. Adams, Ms. Scipio. I'm just, to the floor. If you anything you want to say, ask. I'm just going around the table here.
I just have a question to Mr. Mayor. Is that reducing 1 cent off the proposed tax rate or the revenue neutral
No,
one?
off the proposed rate.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Mr. Andre Bowman.
Thanks, sir. The graph that you just showed of those cities, of those other 4 cities, which of those had property revaluations this year?
Only Durham.
Only Durham, thank you.
Okay. I'm going to make a similar comment that the mayor made. As y'all know, I was aghast when I found out that even if we stay revenue neutral, because home prices, that is residential, single-family homes, went up so much more than commercial industrial, which probably broke even. Now, they're evaluated every year, I believe, not every 4 years. Is that correct? The commercial industrial.
No, it's every 4 years as well.
You sure?
What the county real property, business personal property is revalued every year, but what the county tax director showed you in February was all real property having been revalued on a 4-year cycle.
All right. Well, the point is, theirs did not go up much at all. Some of it actually went down. And that's skewing. And by the way, this is something that's been going on, I think, for 20 or 30 years. At one time, we taxed inventory as property. Well, that's not taxed anymore. And that's huge because at the time, rentals, they have several years' worth of tobacco that's being aged, and that's in inventory. The state actually held us harmless for a few years because it was such a big hit. At one time, there was an intangible tax on securities, stocks and bonds. That went away probably 40 years ago. But over time, the shift has been more towards residential and away from commercial business type. That the citizens were looking, and you threw out a number of 17 cents increase, and that's if we do our job and kept everything as it was. With the proposal we had, we were looking at around 27 cents, I think it was.
Percent.
Yes. Excuse me, yeah, 17%, yes. I'm going to echo what the mayor says. I think, given this huge shift, we need to at least have a best effort to see if there's places we can tighten the belt. I was going to suggest 0.8 cents. That would take it from 4.8 to 4. You can play with both numbers. They're very close to each other. But I think it would be important for us to ask staff how you would tighten the budget a notch on the belt, so to speak. And that's something you can send back to us. I don't know if you want to make some comments. This is not an unexpected question. But I would like to see some, that's what I want to cut. You come back and tell me where you're going to cut it. And I think that's what the mayor asked too. Yes, ma'am. Go ahead.
Thank you. Let me ask this. It's a question. I don't know if it's a clarifying question, but it is a question nonetheless.
Go right ahead.
If I own more than 2 properties, if I own 3 properties, but I can only live in 1 property at a time, am I taxed as having commercial property at that point, of like having a business for those other properties, or am I taxed just as a residential owner?
From a property tax perspective, there will be no difference.
Okay.
The rate is applied to the value divided by 100, no matter whether it's a small single-family residence or the largest industrial complex in the city. The rate has to be uniformly applied to value for every real property type.
So if I own 5, 10, 25 homes, I'm getting charged the same amount as a neighbor down the street that only owns one home.
You're being charged on the value of those 25 homes.
But I mean, I'm not, if all of them are Airbnbs or something like that, I'm still not being charged as a person running a business per se, just resident.
Your premise is correct. As the tax collectors, assessors, they're valuing property based on what the given use is of that property. But in given use, they're looking at if it's a house, they're assuming that's a residential property. So when we talk about residential versus commercial industrial, that's typically based on the zoning characteristics of that property, not on what it's used for. So if you're running a business out of your home, that your home is not counted as a business or a commercial property. We assume that it's assessed as a home, and your property tax assessment is based on that being a home. What they're supposed to do is base it on what they believe that property would sell for. So as you mentioned, they're looking at comparisons for other houses in the same neighborhood. So yes, if you have a house that you're renting to someone that's right beside a house that's the home ownership home, and those homes are basically built at the same time, same characteristics, et cetera, they will likely be, or they should be, assessed the same, and the property tax rate that somebody would pay would be roughly the same on both of those houses, despite their uses, because they're seen as houses. Does that answer your question?
Mm-hmm. It does. Thank you.
Okay.
You got 25 houses?
No, but I know a couple of people who do, and anyway, thank you.
I think the question I hear underneath that is a house that's rented as an Airbnb have a different value than a residential house. And I don't think it would, because they wouldn't know that. As the city manager said, they're going to look at the houses around it, and that house is kind of like these other 2 or 3 houses, so they would all have similar values. Anyway.
In answering to you and responding to your previous question about things that we're going to do, we anticipated the question, and so we're looking at a variety of options that we can bring back to you, that if you decide that you want to reduce the tax rate, here are some options of services or programs that could be cut in terms of doing that. If council has anything in specific that you want us to include on that list, whether that's items to be looked at to be removed from the budget or something else that you'd like to see tweaked in the budget. For example, I know that there was discussion about the Parks and Recreation fees, particularly swimming fees. Would that be an item that council would like for us to look at as a part of that? Now, that's going in the wrong direction in terms of cutting the rates, but if the desire of the majority of council is for us to include, as an example, not implementing increase on swimming pools until, let's say, January 1st, so it doesn't impact this swimming season, it wouldn't go into effect till next year. Those items would be helpful for us to know, and we will include those on the list.
And I would say if you have ones like that, please, if you could share them through me, and I'll put together a complete list to come back. But yeah, big or small, let me know what your thoughts are. I would appreciate if you've got some ideas, just share them with us. Nothing's set in stone. The mayor's asked, and I've asked the question, if we had to tighten the belt a notch, what are some of the places you would suggest we tighten it? And if you could help us with that, because that will answer the question, okay, am I willing to accept that trade-off? Taxes are a little bit lower, but I don't have X or I don't have Y. And I think that would be.
In terms of just some broad-based categories, then clearly 45% of our tax increase is based on transit service costs. So we are looking at what are the lowest routes or the lowest usage areas in our transit system to bring back as potential options. And again, these are options for council to decide whether you want to keep these or not. But so that clearly would be one set of options that we'd be looking at, because that is a key driver in what's going on in our in the proposed budget that's in front of you. The other areas we'll look at, honestly, in terms of the bulk of our costs are sunk in personnel. And so we would have to look at, do we need to tweak what we're doing in terms of positions, in terms of salary merit adjustments? Do we look at potential positions that we can eliminate, and the services that go along with those individual positions? So that's, generally speaking, that's where you're going to look at if there's something that you don't want us to see us continue doing. I will say that when our conversations with the public, our community surveys, conversations with each of you, I have not been told of many, quite honestly, any specific services people would like to see cut or eliminated. It generally goes in the other direction of services they'd like to see us provide more of. So that is a difficult one, but that is where the bulk of our costs are. And then there's a few areas that we'll go back in and look at if there's some tweaks that we can make from adjustments that people have submitted to us that we're taking a second look. Is this something that can be brought back down a little bit without damaging the budget in terms of the long term? The things that I would be hesitant to bring back to you are things that are just delaying cost for another year. So not replacing a vehicle and then just postponing that to next year basically just means we've got another vehicle a year down the road that's in worse shape, and our maintenance costs are going to be higher. So we'll not be looking at bringing those kind of proposals back to you. So we are looking at specific service cuts or reductions that we think would have the least amount of impact on the majority of our community as a part of those cuts that we would be looking at. But transit's going to be a big one. It's obviously personnel is a big part of what we're doing. And then the other areas, is there anything that we could tighten up? And I've been a variety of small suggestions that have been put forth, and we're looking at each of those.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Scipio.
I am concerned, and I just need clarity, about anticipating possible cost reductions from the federal and state because of all the things that are going on there. What happens when we have adopted a budget and say in September we find out those federal dollars are not coming or the state dollars are not coming? It may be September, October. Then what is our process for adjusting our expenses? And because I know we can't raise taxes at that point.
That is correct. At that point, your tax rate is set, and so you will not have the option of going back and adjusting the tax rate to cover those costs. So our options will be to come back to you and for grants that fund specific programs or services, typically our only option is to come back to tell you that we're going to eliminate those programs or services. We've talked a lot about the state gasoline tax or POW bill funds that it's called about. If those come out later after we've adopted the budget and the state decides that they're going to cut back the amount of money or eliminate the money coming to us, then we will have to adjust the cost in that category, because that's what those funds are sent to us for. So unfortunately, in that case, the resurfacing is a big part of that, but there's also a fair number of personnel that are related to maintenance of our street areas. So we would have to come back to you and say, at that point, this revenue is no longer anticipated to come to the city. We have to adjust our budget downward and take out services to do that. The same would be true for federal funds that come from CDBG or home funds, any number of ones that we get from the federal government. We would have no choice but to say we're going to have to reduce these services.
Good question.
Thank you.
With that, I remind you again, next week I will meet with all of y'all if you're in town. And I'd like to do it in person. That way I can answer any specific questions. And after I talk with all 8, and Mayor, I'll put you in that group too.
Thank you.
I will then be ready to make a recommendation. I will say this budget's not going to change much. We really are talking, even if we cut a penny, you're still tweaking. It's a $700 million budget to cut $3 to $4 million. Now, it's a little more complicated than that, but again, we're not talking about, in Washington, if you ever tell them to cut the budget, the first thing they do, we got to close the Washington Monument or something. I mean, it's not going to be that order of magnitude, but I would like everyone's input, and particularly the new folks, if you have any questions, and you had a very good one, what's the difference between an Airbnb and a residence? Not much, according to the tax assessor. But anyway, with that, we will stand adjourned unless there's any other comments. Oh, and please do your homework. What it is, there's some organizations in there that we're going to be giving money to. And if you're associated with them, we will have to change the motion, and we will excuse you from the motion that, and I'll pick on my neighbor here who happens to work at the food bank. If we're giving money to the food bank, it's probably appropriate for you to excuse yourself from voting on it. So what we would do is actually adjust the motion so that he would not be voting on the food bank. We might vote on it separately or something. But anyway, that's what they do with all this. Mr. Taylor used to be in and still may be in the news media business, and we always had to make some accommodations for that. So anyway, with that, Mayor, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem, second by Councilmember Stowe. No, excuse me, Councilmember Joyner. All those in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We're adjourned.